In today's video, we're doing a Q2 review in books. Let's get right into it. Okay, y'all, I am so happy to present to you a stack of books for this Q2 review in books. If you've never seen a video like this before, what I have been doing on the channel, I think since the beginning of the year, is just talking about the books that I've read in that specific quarter. So the first video that I did in this little series was from January to the end of March, and I just talked about all of the books that I read in between that time period. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about books from March all the way down to the end of June, which is right now. And once again, so happy and proud that I even have a stack to present to you, because I am one of the worst readers. I am one of the worst book lovers. Even though I work in publishing, even though I love all the things that are associated with books and reading and book loving, sometimes I will only read 2 books for the entire year. And I know how that sounds. I know a lot of people will come at me and say that I'm not a legit reader, a book lover, but I still consider myself a book lover and reader. But anyway, I will leave it at that. I have 6 books to share with you that I've read in Q2, and they are all physical except for the most recent book that I finished, which is on ebook. I did not read any audiobooks this quarter because I was big on podcast listening to this quarter. So we're just gonna go through these books. I'm not going to do a full review of all of these books. I'm just gonna give you a brief synopsis of each of them and whether or not I like them and whether or not I think you'll like them based on whatever reading preference you may have. I'm gonna go in order of the books that I first read all the way down to the books that I just most recently finished, if that makes sense. So starting with this one, it doesn't have the cover on it because I can't find the slip, and I don't actually like reading books with the slips on them, so it's somewhere. But it is The Angel of Indian Lake by Stephen Graham Jones. This is actually the final installment in Stephen Graham Jones's Indigenous slasher horror series. I know that just sounds 100% up my alley, which is why I got into the series in the first place. And I absolutely love Stephen Graham Jones. He's one of my very favorite authors, my immediate go-to authors. And I loved this book so much. But first, let me just tell you what it's about. It's essentially an Indigenous slasher horror trilogy. This one in particular, the last one, follows the main character as she returns to her hometown after 4 years. And she's basically trying to rebuild her life after many years of lots of shit happening, only for her to come back and there's more shit happening. Basically, it's so bloody. There's so much going on in this book. It is intense, and like I said, I absolutely loved it. And I will say, usually the first of a trilogy is the best one, and I absolutely loved the first book, but this one, the third one and last one, was my favorite. I loved this one so much. I think Stephen Graham Jones wrapped it up super well, and I have a special place in my heart for the main character, Jade. It's so fun. If you're into horror, if you're into slashers, if you're a big horror person, there are a ton of horror references in here that will make your inner horror nerd so happy. And the story itself is incredible. It's unique. It's interesting. I feel like it has its own space in the horror world now because it's very different, even though it calls on a lot of common horror tropes. Sorry for the lighting. The sun is just moving around. Even though it calls on a lot of similar horror tropes or commonly known horror tropes, it's still a very unique story, and I love it so much. I have to do a podcast episode on this whole trilogy for Live or Alone Pod, which is my horror podcast. If you did not know, I have one of those. What a great way to kick off Q2. But the second book that I have is by an author that I've always wanted to read. It's 19 Claws and a Blackbird. I don't exactly know why I picked this one up suddenly. I think it was during Indie Bookstore Day, and I figured, like, once again, I've always wanted to read a book by this author, so I finally picked it up. And this one is actually a collection of short stories, as opposed to, I think this author does a lot of short novels, but this one is a collection of short stories. It's 19 stories to be exact. The stories in here are so dark. They're wild, they're weird, they're disturbing, they're unsettling. It's all of the things that I absolutely love. And so I really did enjoy reading this, although most of the time my brain was just going like, what the hell? am I reading? There are a lot of stories in here, if not all of them, that are just like, what the hell? It's something that you would probably never ever think of putting down on paper. It's in this book. And it was fun. It was interesting. Some of the stories stood out more than others. Some of them were really like fever dream types of stories where I can't even tell you the details of them anymore because it was just that wild. Overall, I really love the writing. So if you're into any of those types of things, you will like this, although I am almost positive you'll come out of it thinking like, WTF. Which some books I would argue that's a good thing. Now the next book is another WTF book, but perhaps not for the best. This one is Night Bitch. This one is by Rachel Yoder. I'm hoping I'm saying the last name correctly. But this one is about an artist who becomes a stay-at-home mom, and she believes that she is turning into a dog. And that synopsis right there is what got me to get this book in the first place, because that sounds wild and weird and WTF, just like many of the books that I'm into. But from the very get-go, I knew that I wasn't going to absolutely love this book. It's just not my vibe. I think it is well written, and I think it was an impactful story, and I think it was weird and bizarre in a cool way, but I just find it to be very first wave feminist in my opinion. And there are so many things about it that I do love and I will hold on to, but by the time I finished it, I wasn't completely floored by it as other people are. And it's so funny because as soon as I finished this book, or right as I was finishing this book, it was announced that they're going to be doing a movie with Amy Adams as the main character for this, which actually really intrigues me. Not because Amy Adams is doing it, and Amy Adams is great, but because this book is so bizarre, I don't know how you can turn it into a visual. So that's super interesting, and I'm glad that I was able to experience it in the written sense, so that if I do end up seeing the movie, it will make probably more sense to me, as opposed to someone who's never read the book before. But yeah, not my favorite. It might be my least favorite of the stack, to be honest with you, and I know that's going to be controversial for some people, but I digress. That is my opinion, just my opinion. The next book that I have is a much shorter book. Actually, a lot of the books that I've read, aside from the first one by Stephen Graham Jones, is short. I've noticed that I'm a short book gal. This one is called Lemon. I found this at the Strand, and it was underneath, or it was at a table about horror thrillers, and to my surprise, to my like positive surprise, a lot of books on the table were not very conventional, popular, well-known titles. A lot of them were translated thrillers and horrors. And I was super happy to see that because sometimes I get sick and tired of seeing the same books over and over again. This one stood out to me when it came to the translated horrors that were part of the selection because of how thin it is. I don't think it's even 200 pages. And it also says on the back that it's Parasite meets The Good Son, as like a comparison to what's going on in this book, so that also got me. And it's essentially a psychological story of three women who have been greatly impacted by a crime, an unsolved crime, and the crime does get solved by the end of it. But wow, it takes you on a journey over several years, many years, and it's absolutely fascinating. It has like commentary on society, on women and how we treat women in society, in addition to a thriller that's happening at the same time. It was so much fun to read. I read this so quickly, and I know this one has a lot of mixed reviews. Some people really like it, some people were just like meh, but I really enjoyed it. I did, even though I knew exactly what was going on, and like I kind of saw the progression of the crime and who was going, like what the solution or the solving of the crime was going to be, but I still had a fun experience regardless. And there's a line in here, if I can find it, I'll share it on my Instagram story, but there's a line in here that stuck with me so much, and it kind of ties into slow living, which is so weird to say about a book about a crime. But anyway, really, really good one, and a quick read if you wanted to give that a try. The next book is Chlorine, and this one I was not anticipating reading at all. I wasn't anticipating picking up at all, but I was at McNally Jackson's in Soho, and I tend to go in there and just browse because it's a really nice bookstore. They have a stationery section. I'm in that area quite often, sometimes on the weekend. And I opened up the book and I saw that it was signed. And so I've been seeing this book circulate a lot on the internet, and I did want to eventually get it, but it wasn't like top priority. When I saw that it was signed, I figured I should probably just pick it up. It's signed. Might as well, snag that really cool perk there. And I did. And I decided to just start reading it because I picked it up right at the start of summer, or right before summer started. And this has a lot of pool vibes. Even though I'm kind of jumping around here, it's definitely not a summer read. It's definitely not a beach read. But if you're someone weird like me who likes weird, disturbing WTF types of books, you could really, really reach and say that this is a summer read. So long story short, that is why I ended up picking it up and reading it before any of my other books that I have laying around in my TBR. And wow, this book is short. Wow, this book really surprised me. I did not anticipate it being one of my favorite books out of the quarter, but it's one of my favorite books out of the quarter. Anyway, it is about a girl. It's kind of like a coming of age story. We kind of follow the progression of this girl from childhood all the way up into like high school, college years. And as time goes on, she is convinced that she is a mermaid. There's a lot more going on other than that. Like I was talking about with Night Bitch, there's a lot more going on where she thought she was turning into a dog. There's a lot of social commentary in there as well. And the same goes for this one, but this one I feel like hits so much more than Night Bitch did for me. This one touches on, society. It touches on, having immigrant parents. It's LGBTQIA. It's definitely a queer novel as well. It's so good. It touches on so many things in such a great way. And so by the end of the book, I was hit so hard with emotions because I really felt for the characters in this book. And I will say, when I first started it, I really thought like, I'm not gonna like this. It started off slow. So just a heads up that it does have a bit of a slow burn in the beginning where you're like, what the heck is going on? I don't really care that much. But then as time progresses and you get closer to like the middle section, you're really, really invested. And it's a wild ride, but it's such good writing and a really fantastic experience. I will never forget this one. I'm definitely going to be recommending this one for the near future for my fellow WTF reader friends who want something to read during the summer that has some association with summer vibes, aka there's a lot of pool and beach talk in here, or summer vacation talk in here. I hope that made sense. It's so funny talking about a lot of these books because a lot of these books are WTF books. They're books that are so hard to explain because the story itself is so wildly written that you kind of just have to experience it and get on the roller coaster and, enjoy the ride kind of books. But I hope I'm making sense. I'm hoping that I'm not sounding like I'm blabbing about complete nonsense. Honestly, whenever I do videos like this, I do feel like I'm blabbing and I make zero sense. But anyway, I'm going to be talking about the last book now. And this book I read on my Kindle because I read it mostly while I was en route to Cancun, because I just recently went to Cancun for a wedding and I wanted to read something beachy. I wanted to read something light, and I wanted to finally give romance a try because I'm not a romance reader. That's a genre that I kind of actively avoid because I'm kind of afraid of picking up a romance read and it's going to be so cheesy and it'll turn me off from the genre altogether. So because of that, I ended up going with an Emily Henry book because everyone loves Emily Henry. I felt like that would be the least risky book to try because if a lot of people like it, then chances are it's not super corny. I don't know, that was just my mindset. And I discussed this with a lot of people. Don't know why I'm giving so much backstory, but I discussed this with a lot of people because I know so many people have read Emily Henry. I've gotten complete mixed reviews. So if you were trying to find out which Emily Henry book you should start reading, I'm here to report that everyone around me has no idea. They had their own opinion. They absolutely love one book. Another person will absolutely hate that one and love another one. So complete mixed reviews when I was consulting with other people. I ended up going with my gut based off of 2 that sounded interesting to me, and I went with People We Meet on Vacation. Mostly because it sounded like very, very summery. It sounded like something that would be good to read while on the beach in Cancun. It was the closest to that, and that's exactly what I was kind of looking for. So yeah, People We Meet on Vacation. This one is about 2 best friends that have spent 12 summers together, and the timeline kind of jumps back and forth between those 12 summers, and then there's one final big reveal at the end, and one of the taglines is like, one chance to fall in love. I will say, as someone who's not a romance reader, I don't think it was too cheesy. I think when we talk about the romance genre, we have to expect a little bit of that because that is kind of embedded in the tropes of romance. So I knew that I needed to expect a little bit of that. And it's not too much in this book, which I'm so happy to say. By the way, I finished this book this morning, so it's really fresh in my head. But yeah, it's not super cheesy. I had a really great time, actually. Even though there were some parts where I felt like it was really slow burn and it was taking a bit too long. Like, these books are almost 500 pages or 4 or something pages, and I'm not a big fan of that. So for me, it was kind of like dragging at certain points, but I think it was worth it because by the end, the impact of the final reveal at the end was really great, and I felt it, and I actually cared for the characters by the end of it, and the romance part hit really hard. So I guess that's why you kind of need to do those slow builds sometimes. So overall, I really liked it. I think it was a fantastic romance read. Definitely a good one for people who are just trying to get into the genre. If you're skeptical like me, just anticipate some cheesiness because you have to, but it's still a really good one, and I really liked it. I will say I will most definitely give Emily Henry another chance if I wanted to get back into romance, but I think I'm ready to go back into my WTF books, even though this was a really fun escape from the WTF vibes for the summer. I just have a lot of summer thrillers that are already on my list that I want to get to in the summer, which is why I'm not going back into romance, but if something changes along the way, you'll definitely hear about it in the Q3 review in books. But those are all the books. 6 books, like I said. Last year and the years before that, I've always had a goal of reading 12 books a year, which is essentially just 1 book a month. And I have read 11 books this year, and we're in June. I'm filming this in June. So needless to say, I am really proud of myself, and I'm really happy with the progress that I've been making. Not just to get those numbers in, because for me, the numbers can be intimidating, and over the past few years, it clearly doesn't do much for me, but more so that I'm prioritizing something that I really like, and I'm finally investing time in myself and my personal joys and my personal interests, whereas in the years prior, I have really prioritized work and deadlines and projects before anything else. So more than anything, I am happy about that, and I'm hoping to have a successful Q3 when it comes to books or whatever else that I'm getting into. You'll find out in the future. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you've read any of these books, I would love to know your thoughts on them, whether you agree with me or not. I completely respect everyone's opinions, and I know I'm going to hear some stuff about Night Bitch, but I'm open to hearing whatever thoughts you have, and I would love to know what you read in this past quarter. Let me know what your Q2 review is when it comes to books. I do have a link below to bookshop.org that has all of the books that I've read in 2024 so far, so if you want to, browse that, you can definitely do that. But yeah, thank you so much once again, and I will talk to you in next week's video. Walking